Good evening, I'm Robbie Albay. The big stories tonight. Optimism runs high the world over after Pfizer announces a 90% efficacy for its experimental vaccine. The country's envoy to the U.S. assures a reasonable price for the shots at $5 apiece. The country's economy contracted by 11.5% in the third quarter. That's an improvement from the record slump in the second quarter, but the bounce back might not be enough to meet full-year targets. Ulysses is expected to intensify into a severe tropical storm this evening. It is projected to directly hit Metro Manila and an already typhoon-battered southern Luzon. Walk the talk. This is newly minted National Police Chief Sinas' message to his personnel as he officially takes the helm of the PNP. And post-election legal battles are starting in the United States. The State Attorney General has given the go signal on voting investigations. Now let's start with the prospect of a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine inching closer to reality as Pfizer and BioNTech jointly developed vaccine had a 90% efficacy rate in its phase 3 trials. Question is, will it be made available in the country and when? Greg Gregorio with a big story.
Health authorities brand as a welcome development the promising results of a vaccine jointly developed by Pfizer and BioNTech. Dr. Jaime Montoya, Executive Director of the Science and Technology's Philippine Council for Health Research and Development, hopes the shots prove to be safe and effective.
That means if their data truly supports that kind of efficacy, then they will easily get approved in the US and subsequently here in the Philippines.
Vaccine SARS Secretary Carlito Galvez earlier said that the country is now in talks with 17 vaccine manufacturers, including Pfizer.
Nung panahon na nandiyan po si President Trump, nag-usap po ang ating mahal na presidente na ipa-priority po ng US ang Philippines. So through Pfizer and other companies like Moderna,
the negotiation with Pfizer is for the procurement of vaccines. The Philippine ambassador to the United States, Babes Romualdez, assures the public that Pfizer's vaccine will be sold at a reasonable price in countries like the Philippines.
Hindi naman ibebenta sa mga bayan kagaya natin na mahal dahil alam nila na tayo'y simple country, moderate. So it will be sold to many of their allies, specifically in the Philippines, na hindi naman gano'ng kamahal. It will probably be around $5 siguro per shot.
Health officials also laud the favorable results of Gamaleya's ongoing phase 3 clinical trials for Sputnik V.
If they're all 100% or more than 90% effective, that's very good. Why? Because that means we have many to choose from. And we will not be just using one vaccine or two vaccines, but many vaccines.
While Gamaleya's application for clinical trial phase 3 in the country is still pending for months now, authorities say they can already apply for certificate of product registration before the FDA, as long as they're complete with their last stage trials. Pfizer and BioNTech's candidate vaccine, as well as Gamaleya and other manufacturers, are using different platforms or technology for their vaccine development. Some are also using inactivated vaccines. All of these require a certain level of cold storage and cold chain.
Yung kasing mga inactivated virus ay nagre-range lang sa 2 to 8 degrees centigrade ang kailangang lamig. And most of our hospitals have that kind of storage facility.
Vaccine SARS Secretary Galvez says the government is prepared to handle the cold storage requirement of each vaccine that they will procure. He adds that all of these are part of the country's COVID-19 vaccine roadmap, which the IATF has recently approved. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Scientists say the initial trial results for Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine candidate far outpaced their expectations. The pharmaceutical companies claim that their shots are more than 90% effective against COVID-19. This is based on data from their ongoing phase 3 clinical trials. Experts are warning the public to remain cautious despite the encouraging news.
We have to also acknowledge that the results are still somewhat preliminary. And, I don't want to put a spoiler alert on this, but we need to know how long the protection will last.
Russia's Gamaleya also claims that Sputnik 5 is more than 90% effective. The firm will publish its preliminary late-stage trial results this month. As for China's Sinovac, the late-stage trials in Brazil have been halted following an adverse effect on a participant last October. Health authorities in Brazil have yet to announce the date of resumption. The government will no longer meet its full-year growth target for the Philippines as the country's economy saw its third straight contraction in the third quarter due to the impact of the pandemic. Shiloh Francisco tells us the extent of the damage in this report.
Lani was forced to close down her small carinderia in Mandaluyong due to losses brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. But this was just the start. Soon after, her eldest son and husband lost their jobs due to strict lockdowns. And even while she was forced to rent a portion of her tiny house, money did not last long. All these happened as her older brother, who is also living with her, died in September. She only relied on 20 and 50 peso donations from neighbors.
Sabihin ko sa apo ko, mahirap yung naranasan natin. Walang trabaho, walang pera, walang pagkain. Asa na lang po kami sa bigay.
Lani is just one of the families affected by worsening economy since the pandemic started. The Philippine economy in the third quarter contracted by 11.5%, which is worse than the 9.2% decline estimated in a Business World survey. Still, the third quarter print comes as a slight improvement from the previous quarter's revised 16.9% plunge, which sent the Philippines into its first recession in nearly 3 decades. Aside from the slump in household consumption, construction, personal care services and entertainment, hotel accommodations and restaurants also dragged down growth. But it was the agricultural sector that was the quarter's bright spot, yielding growth year on year. For the National Economic and Development Authority, the National Capital Region and other nearby provinces returned to stricter lockdown in August, as well as the ECQ in Cebu, affected economic growth from July to September. NEDA also noted that the resumption of limited transportation was not enough to open the economy since workers cannot go to work.
So those show that the impact on the economy were actually more severe than expected.
The third quarter print brings the country's GDP as of September to negative 10%, far worse than the government's full-year projected contraction of 4.5 to 6.6%. The Philippine Statistics Authority says the country would need to grow by more than 6% in the fourth quarter to achieve the 2020 target. But by the looks of it, the agency said this target is no longer feasible. Still, NEDA is optimistic that the economy is now on the mend, especially with the cabinet approving up to 100% operation in some businesses and increased capacity in the transport sector. Chua said the government will consider localized and stricter lockdowns as a last resort.
Given the policy changes and the further opening up of the economy and the policy not to revert to more stringent lockdown, I think the trend really is further improvement in the fourth quarter. And hopefully we will begin to see better figures or positive quarter growths, year-on-year quarter growth starting early next year.
NEDA hopes that the 2021 budget will be passed on time in order to aid economic recovery and push a rebound of 6.5 to 7.5% next year. Shiloh Francisco, VR1 News.
Consumers may expect a more affordable holiday feast this year. The Trade Department has retained last year's suggested retail prices for Noche Buena items. The SRP for regular ham is around 300 to 500 pesos. 350-gram queso de bola could go as low as 280 pesos, while 400 grams of spaghetti is priced at 30 to 52 pesos. The DTI says the pricing could take effect by November 15 to December 1 or December 15, depending on the product suppliers. A group of supermarket owners, though, is crying foul, alleging lack of consultation. The group says they can no longer bring down prices as these items were bought at higher prices from manufacturers.
meron namang gauge ang DTI kung ano yung reasonable na margins. Kaya lang, sana dumaan man lang sa association, hindi naman kailangan bawat member hindi naman bawat tindahan di ba? Para lang mabigyan ng comment na kung talagang fair or unfair on our end, no? Kasi yun na nga, tapos may senior citizens discount tsaka PWD discount pa. Saan kami pupulutin, di ba?
We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, medical frontliners are getting a boost in salary and benefits, at least in the Senate's proposed 2021 budget. And Tropical Storm Ulysses intensifies. It is forecast to pass through Metro Manila and typhoon hit southern Luzon. The details later. Okay. Ryan?
Yes po.
Okay, malinaw
Yes, Robbie. Yes. Yes, Robbie.
Okay,
Yeah.
sige. Standing by. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. The Senate is scaling up the allocation for COVID-19 response in the 2021 national budget. New additions to the spending plan include billions worth of budget for monitoring PhilHealth and disaster response for the NDRRMC. Mean Los Baños has more details.
Senator Sonny Angara, chairman of the Finance Committee, says the 2021 budget will prioritize the strengthening of healthcare system as well as disaster relief. In fact, the Senate has allocated up to 16.6 billion pesos for the salary and benefits of the country's medical frontliners, while some 2.7 billion pesos will be allotted for the procurement of personal protective equipment or PPEs. The upper chamber has also increased the funding for COVID-19 vaccines under the National Expenditures Program to 18 billion pesos, 10 billion of which will be released once the government exceeds its tax revenue targets.
18 billion, good for how many, sir? How many people?
Depende yun sa manufacturer. So I think si Chief Implementer Secretary Galvez was quoted as saying AstraZeneca is the cheapest at 300 pesos. So you can do the math, no? 18 billion divided by 300 pesos.
The committee report has also mentioned funds to be allocated to PhilHealth amounting to 71.4 billion pesos, stressing the need for the Senate to continue monitoring the performance of the agency, making sure that all funds will be used for the health insurance of every Filipino. Meanwhile, the initiative of the lower chamber to pour 300 million pesos for the health department's mental health program will be retained. Angara says this is important, especially during the community quarantine, wherein many Filipinos experience mental health issues. The Senate has also added funding for the NDRRMC to help the victims of back-to-back typhoons in Bicol and other regions. According to Angara, it will be pegged at up to 27.25 billion pesos if the Quick Response Fund will be included. The lawmaker is expecting that budget for the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict or NTF-LCAC will be questioned. The proposed funding for the NTF-LCAC amounts to 19 billion pesos to address insurgencies across the country.
Hindi namin ginalaw yung NTF-LCAC because that is one of the flagship programs of the president. And the DBM told us that if possible, wag natin galawin.
The Senate hopes to approve on third reading the 2021 national budget by November 24. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
The palace is defending Solicitor General Jose Carida's motion for inhibition against Justice Marvic Leonen from the vice presidential poll protest of former Senator Bongbong Marcos. Spokesman Harry Roque said the move is for the country's benefit as it is in the best interest of the public to find out who really won in the 2016 vice presidential race. He also denied that Calida met with the president before filing his motion.
Hindi naman po ganun ang ating presidente. He does not micromanage. Hinahayaan po niya ang kanyang mga gabinete na bigyan ng atensyon at umakto sa mga bagay-bagay na nasa ilalim ng kanilang mga ahensya.
The Presidential Electoral Tribunal once again warned the camps of Vice President Lenny Robredo and Marcos to refrain from discussing the protest. It noted the recent statements and media appearances of both parties. In an interview with One News, the Chief's Integrated Bar of the Philippines head Domingo Cayosa said Leonen's inhibition will depend on the Code of Judicial Conduct. It outlines standards to determine when a justice should inhibit from a case. As regards the Manila Times story alleging Leonen prejudged the fall protest, citing so-called unimpeachable sources, Cayosa said that it would not likely stand up in court.
Well, if it's just a newspaper report with a named source, any judge or much more, the Supreme Court will not look too kindly on that.
These are the other big stories today. The National Task Force Against COVID-19 has released the guidelines for the return of motorcycle taxis. Riders are required to wear protective gear, including a face mask and a full-face visor underneath their helmets. They must also install NTF-approved motorcycle barriers. Only those included in the Technical Working Group's master list will be allowed to join the pilot study. Passengers also are required to bring their own helmets. Contactless payments and the filling out of health declaration forms will also be enforced. Ulysses is expected to intensify into a severe tropical storm this evening. It is moving northwestward at 15 kilometers per hour. It's expected to pass through typhoon-hit southern Luzon and Metro Manila. As of 4 p.m., Ulysses was located 375 kilometers east-northeast of Catanduanes. It has sustained winds of up to 85 kph, gusts of up to 105 kilometers per hour. Pag-asa is raising signal number 2 over Catanduanes, Sorsogon, Albay, Camarines Sur, and the eastern portion of Camarines Norte. Now, apart from Metro Manila, areas under signal number 1 are Rizal, Laguna, Cavite, Batangas, and the rest of Camarines Norte. Also on the list, Tarlac, Pampanga, Bulacan, the central and southern portions of Zambales, Bataan, and Quezon. Signal number 1 has likewise been raised over Quirino, Nueva, Vizcaya, the eastern portion of Pangasinan, Aurora, and Nueva, Ecija. And capping off the list are Masbate, Marinduque, Romblon, Oriental Mindoro, and Occidental Mindoro. Voidable. This is how the Energy Department is describing Chevron's sale of its Malampaya stake to Dennis Uy's Udena Corporation should the parties fail to secure all permits from government. Mayan Los Baños with the details.
The Malampaya gas field is once again the cause of a hot debate in the Senate. Lawmakers grilled the validity of Udena Corporation's purchase of Chevron Corporation's 45% stake in Malampaya. Senate Energy Committee Chairman Win Gatchalian questioned in particular how the transaction moved forward without it going through the Energy Department first. The deal was firmed up in March, but the DOE said the documents on the transaction was only handed over to them on October 28. Gatchalian also questioned the technical capability of the Dennis Uy-led firm to perform gas field operations.
So for all intents and purposes, this is already a done deal. Naging footnote na lang si DOE after. So I don't agree with you that there is no violation because you said earlier that technical capability is such an important aspect of a contractor. And we also established that the mother company is also very important in the entire scheme of things.
But the Energy Department sees no violation. Energy Assistant Secretary Leonido Pulido said all members of the Malampaya Consortium sought their consent before the offer. He also assured the committee that there won't be problems in the gas field's actual operations as Shell Philippines remains as a consortium's main operator. Senator Amy Marcos also sought clarification on whether the purchase could be classified as an incomplete sale. Pulido said it is actually a voidable contract.
The sale of the shares from Chevron Malampaya LLC to Udena LLC is a voidable contract, ma'am. In fact, it's something that is recognized by the members of the consortium when they signed a joint operating agreement. A provision of the joint operating agreement provides that for the sale to be finalized, the party or the transferor has to ensure that they get all prior permits or approvals from the government.
Senator Ping Lacson, on the other hand, asked energy officials if state-run Philippine National Oil Company Exploration Corporation or PNOC can exercise its right to acquire Chevron's stake in Malampaya should the DENA sale end in a legal challenge. PNOC owns 10% of Malampaya while Shell Philippines holds the other 45%. PNOC admitted, however, that they are still not capable to take over large-scale gas field operations. The DOE said they are open to selling the Malampaya shares to the general public, but UDENA has confirmed its commitment to the consortium. The DOE also said that they're still focusing on the commercial contracts of the 3 consortium members. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
We'll take another quick break. When we come back, newly minted PNP Chief Debold Sinas has formally taken his oath as the country's top cop. His message to the police, walk the talk. And the legal battles in the United States are starting to roll. President-elect Joe Biden wants to fast-track his transition to the White House. The details next. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. On his first day in office, newly minted Police Chief Debold Sinas is vowing to intensify the crackdown against illegal drugs and terrorism. To tell us more about the PNP's turnover ceremony, we have Ryan Ang reporting live from Caloocan. Ryan.
Robbie, NCR Police Chief Debold Sinas has formally taken over the leadership of the 218,000-strong Philippine National Police today. Sinas succeeded Emilio Cascolan, who stepped down as the PNP chief after turning 56 years old, the age of mandatory retirement. Retirement honors and change of command were in Camp Crame. Interior Secretary Eduardo Anyo served as the guest of honor and speaker. Anyo challenged the newly minted top cop to intensify the fight against illegal drugs, criminality, extremist groups, and terrorists. Sinas, who hails from Butuan City, is from the Philippine Military Academy, hinirang class of 1987. Before his appointment as NCR POG in 2019, he also served as a PNP Central Visayas Regional Director and Deputy Regional Director in Soc-Sargen. He also had the directorial stint at the PNP Crime Laboratory. In his installment speech as the 25th PNP Chief, Sinas vowed to continue his predecessor's best practices. His first order of business is to designate his most trusted men to lead anti-drug enforcement units. He also wants to ban gambling and golf during office hours. Last May, Sinas drew public outrage for holding his birthday mananita in the middle of strict quarantine measures at the onset of the pandemic. 2 months after that, Sinas made headlines for allegedly harassing a retired police officer's family over a land dispute in Taguig. But in any case, Sinas promised that the PNP will be transparent under his wing. This is what he had to say.
On the campaign against illegal drugs, we will revitalize the different drug enforcement units to focus their operation on anti-illegal drugs in the apprehension of high-value targets or individuals, and in the identification and neutralization of the remaining ninja and narco cops.
Robbie, it's also going to be a short stint for Sinas as PNP chief. He is set to retire on May 8 next year when he himself turns 56 years old. Robbie?
Maraming salamat, Ryan Ang. Now, former Senator and Defense Secretary Orly Mercado is flagging the supposed lack of continuity in the leadership of the National Police under the Duterte administration. In an interview with 1PH sa Totoo Lang, Mercado said the constant changing of the head of the PNP poses a serious problem in building the institution. Mercado noted that the same problem exists in the AFP, with the top post granted as a reward to high-ranking officials for their performance or contributions. Newly appointed PNP Chief Sinas is the 5th officer to hold the position under the Duterte administration.
Dapat sa mga nalalabing buwan at taon ng presidency ni Presidente Duterte, there should be a push to have a law. Give them a term of at least 3 years to be able to accomplish things and mawala yung revolving door issue.
In sports, the 2020 PBA Philippine Cup quarterfinals cast is now complete. Rain or shine clinched an 80-74 win against TNT on Tuesday to barge into the quarterfinals. JV Mocon finished with 16 points and 9 rebounds, while James Yap scored 16 in the first half. The Elasto Painters now have a 7-4 win-loss record. Meanwhile, defending champion San Miguel maintains a comfortable lead against struggling Northport. Fourth quarter is currently underway, 110-83 in favor of the Beermen so far. San Miguel, which is well within PBA's Magic 8, hopes to slide up from its 6-4 card. The camp of U.S. President-elect Joe Biden is looking to take legal action over a federal agency's delay to recognize his victory over Donald Trump. The General Services Administration has yet to recognize Biden's win, which is meant to kickstart the transition of power. A source close to GSA Administrator Emily Murphy, who is a Trump appointee, says the administrator is taking her time to make a decision. Another GSA official said this was not the first time the agency took longer than usual in approving the start of a formal transition. U.S. Attorney General William Barr, meanwhile, is urging federal prosecutors to investigate the supposed voter irregularities being claimed by outgoing President Trump. This has prompted the top lawyer overseeing voter fraud investigations to resign in protest. Trump has yet to concede. The future of human and cargo transport is here. Transportation tech company Virgin Hyperloop completes the world's first passenger ride on a super high-speed levitating pod system. Two company executives are aboard the pod as it speeds through a vacuum tube at up to 172 kilometers per hour. The Hyperloop system uses magnetic levitation to allow near-silent travel. It is twice as fast as a commercial jet flight and 4 times faster than a high-speed train, which means it could reduce travel time between New York and Washington to just 30 minutes. The Virgin Hyperloop has run more than 400 tests without human passengers in its Las Vegas, Nevada testing site. It's working toward a safety certification by 2025, commercial operations by 2030. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.